So welcome to our panel discussion on Everyone is a Physicist. We have lots of great panelists here, and they all have really good talks on perusal. If you haven't seen them yet, they're great. Also, if you have questions about them, now is a good time that you can potentially ask them if you haven't yet. So today we're just going to talk about our topic of the day, which is Everyone is a Physicist. I'm going to let our panelists introduce each other. There we go. Now we're being featured. And I will start while everyone's kind of getting into the featured thing, just as a little introduction. So if you just want to give your name, sort of what you do, and then what does the topic mean for you? So everyone is a physicist. So I am Dr. Jolene Johnson. I am in Minneapolis. I taught college for a while. I have a PhD in physics. I ended up going back to teach high school because of issues around equity and deciding that that's where a lot of the equity issues start. That and my school closed physics program. And so I've taught in a number of different high schools working on issues in equity in physics. Everyone as a physicist is so important to me. So when I got my PhD in the state of Minnesota in 2012, I was the only female in the state that year to get a PhD in physics. And so I just, from my experience of being very isolated and lonely, this means a lot to me, and seeing that everyone can be a physicist and making sure that everyone can see themselves as a physicist is so important to me when I think about setting up my classrooms. So that's me. And it looks like not all of our panelists are featured yet, but Rob, you're next to me, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself first.
Sure. So I am Dr. Rob Krakow. I'm from New York, and I do a lot of research in physics equity, student access, stuff like that. And I remember as a student being told basically I wasn't allowed to take the AP physics course and the AP math courses and the AP comp science courses, and going to the school and saying, nah, I want to take these. These are the fun teachers. The cool kids are in here. They're doing cool stuff. It's fine. I don't care about the grade. Let me take it. And they were very concerned with college and this. And I wasn't. I had very little concern at the moment. But I never realized what I really set myself up to until I went to college, the engineering route, but didn't really like it. So I swung the other way into the pure mathematics route. Couldn't really handle it. And I found a nice in-between physics. And the big joke with a lot of myself and my colleagues is we never set out to be physics people. We kind of wound up as physics people, and then realized how much we enjoyed it because that's who we were the whole time. And for me, I firmly believe that everybody is like that, but not everybody has the opportunity to really follow up with that. And to me, why should everyone be a physicist is easy because they are. And the question of, is everyone a physicist? Unfortunately, I don't think everybody has the opportunity to do that yet. So my goal is to really make an impact to help change that in whatever little ways I can that help to build the pyramid.
Thanks, Rob. And Michael, you are next.
Thanks. I'm Mike Long. I teach writing in the graduate program at Georgetown University. I'm the co-author of The Molecule of More, which is explains how dopamine and its attendant neurological effects guide us through a lot of behaviors that we take for granted. I was trained as a physicist as an undergraduate at Murray State University. Hooray, Murray State. And then I did some graduate work at Vanderbilt, and now I'm at Georgetown. Is everybody a physicist? Absolutely, in the sense that we're all engaged in a constant feedback loop. We're always observing, measuring in some crude way usually, and then making adjustments. What's the advantage of that? Well, young people come to me all the time, every semester, and say, what should I study additionally? I used to talk to high school kids a lot, and I would say, they would ask me, what should I go study? What should I go study? I want to be a writer. And I would say, go study the hard sciences in general, study physics in particular, because it will equip you to do whatever it is you wish to do. It will show you how to approach whatever challenge or problem is in front of you and give you a method and an attitude that will carry you through. I believe that to this day. I've seen it work in my own life. There is no reason for me to be a writer, except I chose to be one and used what I learned as a physicist to get me there. So is everybody a physicist? Yes. As I guess Rob said, do they all know it? Not completely, but there is so much benefit to having your mind stripped down like a car and rebuilt on this platform. I can never recommend it enough. And I'm pleased to be in this family of people who love what we do.
Thank you. Stephanie, if you're willing to go next.
Sure. I'm Stephanie Everett, and I'm one of those people who don't have a physics degree, but teach physics anyhow, largely because of my husband, who's also here, Jonathan, who spent the first 10 years of his career convincing me that physics was so much better to teach than chemistry. So I now teach physics. But as we get into this question of, is everyone a physicist, and is physics for everyone, essentially flipping it around, I ask myself, does our classroom instruction really reflect that? And more focused, does our classroom assessment really focus on that? So we have a recorded presentation about what we have done to refocus some of our assessment techniques. But what I think is, like, if you give standard tests and quizzes, that's not selling a message probably that everyone's a physicist, because we have people who do really, really well on those assessments, and we have people who really struggle. And those people who struggle take home the message that physics is not for them. Furthermore, when we bust people's GPAs from physics, we're sending a message to the guidance counselors that physics isn't for everyone, and we're not getting the students that we should probably be getting into our classrooms. So we spent the last 5 years or so really focusing on how to change our assessments so that we can in fact convince everyone that they should be part of physics. Part of that is giving students a chance to fail. Students are basically allowed to redo most of their assignments again and again and again in our classrooms until they're successful. And some people say, well, that's a lot of grading. Well, it used to be a lot of grading in the old system of students had to turn in a final project before you ever looked at it. But with the technology we have now, it's not a lot of grading, because I'm sitting there grading and giving kids feedback as they're still completing their assignments. So in Google Docs and Google Sheets, students are working on their lab reports. I'm giving them feedback. They're fixing their mistakes instantaneously. So by the time they're finished with their lab reports, they have something they can be proud of and something that they're really excited to turn in. And I'm not taking off a lot of points usually, and there's not a lot of afterwards grading. Same thing with our problem sets. I tell my students the first time they turn it in, it's a rough draft. Just like English class turns in rough drafts, we turn in rough drafts of physics problems. I give them feedback. Their job is to go fix it. Once again, I'm only going to recorrect the ones that they need to fix. I'm not going to go back and grade everything again, so I have records of what they have to fix. Another major thing that we did to convince everyone that physics is for them is that we give them choice in their end of the quarter assessments. So we've developed different performance assessments where students can choose from a video, from an essay, from a lab that they haven't done in class, from a photo journal, and they have choice of how they want to share their knowledge, but they also have choice of what topic they want to investigate further. So one of the things that Step Up program has showed me is physicists go into so many different fields. So the students have a chance to go personalize what interest they want to investigate more deeply and apply all the concepts from the quarter two for their project. So if we revamp our assessments, I think we can convince a lot more people that yes, physics is for them.
Thank you. And Jane.
Oh, that's me, Jane. Okay. All right. Well, all right. We live and move and have our being on this planet. It's a physical planet. We encounter physics every moment of our lives. You're sitting down right now. Why are you not floating in space? Gravity, right? That's physics. All right. So at a very basic level, we're all physicists. And so societally, we have to face a big, big problem, and that is the global climate crisis. What kind of world will young people inherit? Sea rise, extreme drought, vast fires, huge migrations, you know. And to slow the devastation, we need to love the physical planet, our only home, so that we'll honor it and preserve its resources. Jim Hansen, the PhD physicist, climate scientist, made me aware of this. He said, when asked, you know, how do you guide young people? He said, teach them to love the planet. Okay. Now, love encompasses and includes understanding. As Stephanie pointed out, Mike, physics teaches us evidence-based thinking. Understanding increases our awareness and causes us to love our planet more. Thinking like a scientist, as in modeling instruction, which I've been involved with for 26 years. Eugenia Utkai's Isle and POEM. So intelligent actions can follow from evidence-based thinking. So we need physics for all right now in this crucial time in our civilization. One more thing, Singapore seems to realize this. Physics is taken by most high school students, and teachers are expected to get 60 to 90 hours of professional development every year. Deliberate practice, that's the basis of my talk. Deliberate practice is needed in order for us to do a good job increasing physics. But the federal government has stopped funding most every professional development program for the past 6 years. So I'm hoping that Eric Mazur, with his connections in Washington, can make a difference here and get the federal government to reinstate the 2.5% set aside that goes to every state. It used to go to every state for use by people like me in higher education to fund summer professional development. I used to work with 24 physics professors around the nation in 18 states to have to get funding, $50,000 grants from the feds for professional development workshops for physics teachers. That all went by the wayside about 20 years ago. We need to bring it back.
All right, thank you. I think we got everyone, yes? Everyone's, okay. So at this point, I would love to take questions from the audience or even panelists if you have questions. And of course, I have some plants in there that I will ask, but only if there aren't other ones. There's already one in the chat that I think is a pretty good place to start. So it was asked, basically, why is the picture of a physicist that remains is that they're doing hard to solve theoretical problems, and it's all this highly advanced math, and there's a certain type of physicist. So why is that the picture? And perhaps related to that, what are you doing or what could we do to help change that narrative? If anyone wants to jump in.
So I can answer that first question. Coincidentally, it's because of Harvard, believe it or not. No shade. It partially, at least in the US, has to do with a couple of the committees that came together in like the 1920s and stuff, and the laziness of Edwin Hall, who basically put together a list of extremely hard physics stuff, slapped it together, submitted it to the committee, and said, if anybody doesn't want this, they should vote that way. But here's the stack of stuff I think should be done. And then shortly after that, College Board implemented basically what are now the SAT 2s based off of that, and here we are. And it hasn't changed since because of, you know, a lot of everything built off of that. Basically, if you want to go to college, you had to take physics. So everybody started to take that physics if they wanted to go to, you know, a science college wasn't really available at that point. And so it was this cyclical thing that really kept going. And so one way I think we can change that is by doing what we're doing. But we need to break down a lot of those barriers, the AP programs, the college credit, stuff like that, that really does, I think, widen this gap of not the have and have nots, but the access versus no access.
I know too, I saw in a couple of your talks, you guys are doing some really cool things around how to better assess students so that you can see their knowledge, right? And I think in this group, there's a lot of people I've seen have some great ideas around assessment and making sure that you're actually assessing people's skills and not just saying like you have to be this Einstein or you're not welcome. So I've seen some really impressive work around that. We do have another question. So Ms. Maxweda, if you would like to go ahead and ask.
Okay, so first of all, I think I'm going to slightly disagree with you as to why I feel this idea about physics being this super difficult idea. It would be hard pressed to find someone famous in chemistry or biology or like any of those areas, right? The moment you say the word physics, it's like Einstein, Hawking's, you've got all these big names, big brain, big geniuses. So that's what high schools associate physics with. And I think that plays a huge role into this idea. And it's all theoretical, math-based, math being the language of, and I think that might play a large role because my kids come into my class with like, I'm not a genius, right? So there's this association because physicists somehow end up being more famous than a chemist, right? Even Madame Curie, she won for chemistry as well as physics, but people know she won it for physics a little bit, right? So I think that also plays a large role as to why students come in with this idea, it's like, oh no. But my question to you guys was like, we're talking about everybody's a physicist, right? But what about art? Right? Could it also say, like when we're saying everybody's a physicist, are we trying to say everybody's like on an Einstein and Hawking's level physicist? Or because we don't say that everybody's an artist, right? We don't have a problem with saying you're a better artist than that person in your techniques or whatever. Why do we not, or why can't we have the same discussion about physics with students? Why can't we tell them you are just not as inclined to understand a physical, like thinking process of physics, just like you're not as inclined to be artistic? Comments? I'm just playing the devil's advocate because I would love for everybody to be a physics person, by the way, being one myself.
Steph, you're muted.
I think part of the issue is we don't use the word physics throughout elementary and middle school. So it's considered this high level course, even though the concepts are so easy that we could teach it in elementary and middle school, but we even introduce some of those ideas, but we don't use the term. So unlike chemistry or biology, where kids are kind of studying life science and are kind of studying chemistry a little bit in elementary and middle school, and they feel kind of connected to it, they don't feel the same connection to physics because we avoid using that term because it's associated with this high level math. So we have to break down and separate understanding the math, which might not be able to happen until high school, versus understanding the concepts of the world around us, which everyone does, and little kids learn it from the time they're 1 and sitting there dropping things over and over and over again. So if we focus on how physics is applied in the world instead of the math at a younger level, I think it'll be less intimidating by the time they get to high school.
I think Eric wanted to jump in too.
You're muted.
Sorry, I do indeed. I said I was going to stay in the background, and here I am, because I felt called upon by Maxuda's question. First of all, thank you for playing devil's advocate. I think that is something that we should always do, right? I mean, if we don't play the devil's advocate with our own ideas, then we're not being careful enough. I think I'm stepping in here because I think I feel some responsibility for this. I came up with this idea of, everyone's a physicist. I think there's a big difference between art, or in fact, most other disciplines, because they don't, we all know that they don't create that same reaction of horror as, you have when you're at a party and you say, I'm a physicist. Right? you will not have the same reaction if you say I'm a photographer, or I'm a painter, or I'm a musician. People may admit that they're not that great at music playing or painting, but there's not that feeling. So I think that we have a need as a physics community to justify what we do, in particular because it's so important in society right now. I mean, so many of the problems that we're facing involve physics at one level or another, from climate change to even public health and so forth. So I think that we need a society that's literate about physics the same way that they're literate about the language that is spoken in the country, that people are teaching. So I think I like the fact that you asked that question, but I think there is a big difference between most disciplines and physics, because they don't create that same type of reaction as people. We have a moral obligation to justify. And then again, I think, as Latasha pointed out so eloquently in her keynote, I mean, at some level, yes, small children, and we heard that also in Eugenia Atkina's talk. What was it, a few weeks ago, right? I mean, children are born curious with an innate curiosity about the world, and are born to try to learn about the world by engaging with the world, by experimenting, in a sense, by putting mud into their mouths because they think it's chocolate. So unfortunately, the current approach to education sort of wipes out that intrinsic curiosity, and I think that it's a shame, and it's a big problem, and we need to collectively work on addressing that. Enough said there. I see Jane has her hand up.
I just want to add one thing too. Just thinking about everyone is a physicist, and I don't think we want to exclude anyone. I'll say that, because right, if someone's wanting to do physics, there are plenty of things that are already pushing them out, and so if they're showing interest, go for it. I don't care if you're not the top student in the class. Like, you are probably going to make it because you are that interested. And it's hard for me to sort out which students had the same access as other students. So I can't be a good judge of like, hey, this person came in ninth grade and doesn't know enough to be a physicist, right? It might be because they didn't get the same access, or they had a different teacher in earlier grades that didn't give them the same opportunities. So I just like being a little careful about like, as a teacher, I never want to tell someone like, you don't have the best skills to do this. Devils, and I know that's not what you're saying, but like the devil's advocate, that was kind of how it came out. I don't know whose hand was up next. Rob and Jane, do you both have, I'm assuming, relevant comments if one of you wants to go?
Jane first.
Yeah. I want to amplify what Stephanie said. Actually, 2 studies have been done. One at College of New Jersey. They studied middle school students and discovered that they do not know what physics is. When asked what is physics, they do not know. When asked what chemistry is, they know. When asked what biology is, they know. But physics, they do not know, even though they've studied physics. Now, in Arizona, we did a survey of almost 900 high school chemistry students, and we asked them, what's physics? Half of them do not know what physics is, and physics is their next course. It should be their next course. They're not taking it, of course, because they don't know what physics is. All right, now, solutions. A number of our expert physics teachers in Arizona came up with solutions, and I actually had got a Meggers grant from the AAPT to hold a Saturday workshop on how do we increase physics enrollment. You can find, if you go to our website, modeling.asu.edu, you'll find a number of documents written by physics teachers on how they have drastically increased their physics enrollment. And so I suggest that teachers do this, and of course we need some money so we can have modeling workshops in the summer all over the nation, and equity and diversity and inclusion are included in now formally in modeling workshops. So all of this fits together.
Awesome. I wanted to follow up with the art comment, because actually I like that a lot, because historically scientists actually had to take art, right? We didn't have a camera or anything to do any studies. If you found a new plant or something like that, you had to hand sketch that to the best of your ability so that people knew what it was. So I think it's more the creativity versus the utility with a lot of this stuff that I think we're touching upon, and maybe we aren't using the words we want to use. But I completely agree that the creativity aspect is what we need to grow and kind of pull away from that utility aspect of just the math. And with what Jane said, one thing I actually like to ask my kids is, you know, did you enjoy chemistry? And then I ask them, what is chemistry? Because prior to the 1900s, chemistry didn't exist, right? Until physics people found the atomic structure and stuff. What was chemistry? Is it just another branch of physics? Is physics an extension of chemistry? Is there a sliding scale? I know if you're from the US, there's this sequence, and I don't necessarily agree with it. But I think that's something we should highlight is in some places there is a sequence, in other places there is this kind of just science pot that includes all of this stuff. So I couldn't agree more with everything that was said.
Great. It looks like Joseph has had his hand up for a while. If you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, actually, I don't want to ask a question. I just have a number of comments. First of all, pardon me, Eric, but I think it's a mistake, at least for young children, to say everyone's a physicist. I think it'd be better to say everyone's a scientist. Because in fact, part of the problem is that if you look at the range of sciences and you look at it from the lens of observation versus inference, what you see is that in things like biology, there's an enormous range for observation. In chemistry, there's some range for observation. But in physics, the focus is on inference. The focus is on analysis. That's the most difficult thing to do. So it seems to me that if we want to draw students, I work primarily helping teachers in elementary schools and middle schools to try to get them to think of science differently than the way they thought about it in the past. They think of it as a set of rules to memorize because that was their, pardon my French, crappy college experience. So I think we need to be more, we can be more inviting if we think generally about science and we focus in the lower grades on observation. Mm-hmm. And as we move to the higher grades, begin to think more and more about analysis. That allows room for a broader range of students to be engaged. Just another comment. Chemistry, to whoever was saying it, chemistry predates physics. There was chemistry going on long before physics was identified as physics. In fact, physics was identified as physics primarily when the concept of energy came along. But, you know, science, chemistry predates that. And of course, obviously, biology does too. I think one of the things we're missing in this conversation is contributions from historians of the philosophy of science, because I think that plays a role in all of this as well. The last thing I'll say is the problem, or one of the problems with physics is that those people who talk about it, those adults who talk about it, think of it in terms of the analytic piece, not the descriptive piece. They immediately think in terms of its mathematics. Biggest problem I have with dealing with middle school teachers who are trying to talk about motion is they want to jump immediately into using algebra. They want to jump immediately into, you know, distance equals velocity times time and stuff like that, and the symbolism, and the kids get lost. They don't see the conceptual development. The power of modeling that Jane was talking about is that you have a lot of that observational piece upon which to build analysis. Well, I've talked too long. That's it.
Okay, Isa, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, so I wanted to add a comment and my 2 cents about the why everyone is a physicist specifically. And I've said this before, but I say this as somebody who trained as a geneticist and a biologist and now is in physics education research, but I want to push back on Joseph and this, maybe we're just splitting hairs. Everyone's a scientist versus everyone's a physicist. I think it's important to emphasize physics for a number of reasons. Number one, there is I think, because physics has this PR problem and this exclusion problem, I think it's important to emphasize that developmentally, young children are born with a naive understanding of physics. And so what this suggests is that we're literally wired, our brain is wired to understand how our world works around us. And so I think there is a distinction between this naive physics that we want to emphasize. Everyone is born with the ability, with the potential, versus everyone can be a professional physicist. And so we want to emphasize the ability, the developmental part. As young children develop, then it's these constructs and it's culture and school and education, the labels and the formal physics that we start to send a message of who belongs and who doesn't. But we all, by virtue of being humans, have the wiring to understand how our world works. We have to for survival. So that's where the everyone is a physicist is coming from. There's obviously also naive biology and naive sense of or understanding of numbers, intuitive understanding of numbers. But the other reason for emphasizing physics is because, I mean, in the chat, we've heard, I think there's been a discussion about chemistry. I don't know if biology has come up, but it's not so much to signal to the students that they can be physicists. It's more to remind us as professionals in physics that all our students have the ability. So I think it's a little bit, it's not to let our students know that they can be physicists, it's to remind ourselves. And then the second thing, there's a point that was made earlier about how we're able to, or how maybe we might feel more comfortable making judgments about students' artistic skills and why we can't do that in physics. I think, again, back to assessment, and Latasha talked about proxies and the proxies that we use to measure achievement. And so I think that based on my own experiences and the time that I've spent learning about psychometrics and education and standardized testing, if I'm honest, I don't feel confident that the proxies that are available to me are the right instruments. And because, I don't know, it takes time to get to know students. I guess I'm kind of going to a place where I would feel much less comfortable telling someone, you don't have the skills, or that person has more skills than you do, or this is where you stand in this ranking of abilities. Because there is this equity element to this. I think we need to be extra careful about our own judgments that we bring and how there are assumptions baked into our assessments. So that's it.
Thank you. It looks like Kassan, you had your hand up next.
Oh, I just wanted to, so I've been listening these 2 days, and one thing strikes me that I don't think we have actually addressed is that in the past 34 years, a lot of new jobs have appeared due to the computer revolution and social media. In the late 70s, hedge funds started hiring physicists and mathematicians. And currently, of course, they're being hired everywhere. So their skills have been extremely useful in the stock market, hedge funds, and so forth. But also, when we were talking about inclusion and why some people don't go to physics and why there are less, let's say, female and underrepresented groups in physics, I was thinking that this was not the case, for example, in Eastern Europe, when the girls and the boys were the same number in college in physics majors. And so it is really a consequence of our socio and economic situation right now. For a lot of very smart, brilliant, say female high school students, a profession in computers or media is extremely attractive. And these professions didn't exist 30 years ago. So we have a lot of now proliferation of new professions that are very attractive. I remember when I learned how to program, I used to do analytical physics, analytical calculations. And when I learned how to program, suddenly the whole world changed. I became very interested in computational problems. So I think that we need to somehow discuss and emphasize the fact that training as a physicist opens also this kind of bigger scope jobs. It's not just learning and skills of formulating a problem, but actually maybe even doing arts with computers and so forth. My daughter wants to major in physics and interior design. And when she started looking for universities, very few universities have both majors. So it's very, very kind of a split. You have the STEM universities, and then you have the more arts universities and colleges. But this kind of intersection of science and art is actually not so common. And this year, I just wanted to mention that I'm just funding right now one grant for 2 years, and I will try to, we will actually have some intersection, Eric already knows about that, between art and mathematical and physical sciences. And in fact, one of Eric's colleagues developed a very nice course last year on that at Harvard. And I think that this proliferation of new professions and where AI cannot do and humans are needed, like art, which probably will be the only one left. I think physics at one point probably will be done by AIs and computers. But it's really in the realm of art where humans are absolutely indispensable.
Good point.
It looks like Donna had her hand up next.
Okay, I think that worked. So I love the idea of physics for all, and I love the idea that physics is a way of thinking and looking at the world. At our school, we teach ninth graders all take physical science, which has basically a semester of chemistry, intro to chemistry, and a semester of intro to physics. You know, on an elementary sort of level. And all students are required to take that. And then the next time it's offered is generally seniors, sometimes juniors, and it's a college level course. We use a college text, but it's algebra based. It does have a lot of math in it. While I see that, you know, physics is a way of thinking, you can't look away from the fact that there is a lot of math in it. And I would like to see more students choose it. But I also I don't want to set them up for more obstacles than they're willing to take on themselves. Some students, I've got one coming in that has less math, but I mean, like, he's a very self-motivated guy. He wants to know this. He's taking it because he wants to know, and he's going to do great. But what I would love advice for, I don't know that really trying to get everyone to take physics is going to be successful. But who do I approach? How do I make it more accessible to students and make them, you know, like, because I mean, the physics department is me. So I would love to see more students interested. At this time, we don't have a lower level just physics class because we're a small school. And I would love to hear any input that you all have to.
I think physics is an amazing topic in that you can teach it no matter where a student is at in their educational journey. And I speak from the perspective of I'm in a small school where I do teach the 11th grade physics, which is the college physics. So we use the college book, like you were just saying.
Right.
But I also teach every student 8th grade science, and having that dual position puts me in a neat perspective in that I think like a physicist because that's what I've been trained in and that's what I've been loved doing as a career. But I like teaching 8th grade science as well because I can model that thinking like a scientist, which is really thinking like a physicist, in and weave that into the 8th grade. Where am I teaching them 4-step equations there? Absolutely not. But I can have them walk and run outside, and I can have them measure something and measure some time and actually use a V equals D over T equation for the first time in their life. And it's real because they just did it. And that's the element that allows you to do it. That 5th grade teacher can do something so long as they have their students do the action, observe it, collect whatever data they want to collect from it. So physics transcends the grade levels because you can work with students no matter where they are on the thinking elements.
I am in a similar position. I teach 6th grade, which includes a unit of physics. And so I'm able to reach there. So they're getting it in 6th grade and they're getting it in 9th grade. But I'd love to see more students choose the college physics that we offer in 12th grade. And I'm not quite sure. I mean, that requires selling it to the counselor as well as the students and parents.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, because when you get to the 11th and 12th grade level, and now you're calling it a college level type physics, that's what begins to scare people away, because now you are going to be held accountable for the higher level math.
Right.
I think, Jane, you wanted to add something?
Well, yeah. Do you have to call it college level? Can't you just call it honors physics? And I know if you could use modeling instruction, you don't have to use much math. Modelers have done action research actually, and some of the and found that graphical methods are much more accessible to kids and don't scare them off. In modeling instruction, the kids own the equations. They own them. They remember them for years and years. There's no problem there. So we got to have modeling workshops and PUM and ISLE as well. Eugenia kind of. I know these 3 programs are super compatible, and this enrollment skyrocket when they're used well. But it's got to have deliberate practice. Got to have modeling workshops or something similar.
Okay. And what were the other 2 that you named besides modeling?
Investigative Science Learning Environment, ISLE, and it's a college level. Yeah, it's college level. Eugenia it kind of developed it at Rutgers, and the high school and middle school version is called PUM, Physics Union Mathematics. And if you go to modeling.asu.edu, that's our website. I put web links, permanent links to lots and lots of Eugenia Itkina's publications. She's a physics education researcher, and she's had 100 papers. And as she had said, she could have had 10 times as many, but peer review. But anyway, there are resources out there, but we definitely need more funding from the federal government.
Thank you.
And Stephanie, you had something to add too?
Yeah, real quick here. The other thing that I do teaching at a small school where there's only 1 level of physics offered is I don't necessarily require the same expectations for every single student. So I have a base problem set, but then I will excuse them from some of the easier problems if they want to go choose the more challenging problems. And you might think students would never do that, but the ones who want to go into physics and engineering and really like that challenge actually give up doing the easier problems and go for the harder problems. So if you can start to offer students choice of what level of difficulty they want to work at, some of them will take that harder level, even though you don't require it, and don't even offer bonus points sometimes. So
that's a great idea.
And then we are almost out of time here, but Joshua, you had your hand up on and off. Did you still have a question?
Yes, I think it's more of not of a question but a comment, because on the discussion a while ago on everyone is a physicist, I got actually quite triggered on some points, because when we are actually talking about everyone is a physicist, I actually kind of say to myself that everyone has the ability to become a physicist. That's the thing that we want to emphasize as physics teachers. That will be, of course, now in the discussion a while ago, there is actually a comment about I knew more than I thought I knew. So I think if we emphasize on that aspect, that a student actually know more than that he knew about physics. If everyone know, or the student really knows more about that, this is actually physics, I think the student can become more curious and then develop a sense of wanting to become or a professional in physics. And also, I just want to add that the tabula rasa idea, or the concept of tabula rasa, in which everyone is born as a blank entity, and we develop a sense of curiosity, and we experience, and we go about our day-to-day, and that's how we learn. And if we include that, if we identify or if we emphasize that when we are teaching, we can actually say to the student that since we are a blank entity, there is always a possibility that we can accomplish anything as long as we want, and we have perseverance and curiosity about that topic. And also, of course, as teachers, I actually agree with some of the points a while ago, that we have the ability to let our students discover what they want. Actually, there's a story a while ago in the talk. If we let our students discover what they want, or if we negate them to dream bigger. So if we bring students the physics is actually this good, I think we can spark some ideas that physics is actually good to take in higher education or in colleges. Now, there are few people doing physics, and I've actually asked them why did they don't want to be in physics. So they answered actually that physics is really hard. Well, at that point, at that answer, I think at some point that is something that we should actually be doing, have an idea on how we should troubleshoot that idea, because that's actually the surfacing idea of why a lot of people are not doing physics. So yes.
Thank you. I think that's a great place to wrap up. I think, Eric, you wanted to do some housekeeping stuff before our session ends?
Yes, I first of all wanted to thank you, Jolene, for moderating this panel. I felt like we could go on for another, several hours here, which is great. It's better to run out of time than not being able to fill the time. Secondly, I want to thank the panelists here. Thank you so much for contributing, not only contributing your talk, but also contributing to this discussion. And finally, of course, all of you participants, thank you for coming. I would encourage you all to go to the spatial chat. Yesterday, it was really an exciting event. There were many people mingling and chatting and talking. Once people got used to this interface, and there were, even by 4 o'clock when we had planned to close it, there were still quite a few people around. So I hope to have that again today. Also, keep participating in perusal in the talks. And then finally, tomorrow is our last day. We're going to be talking about pedagogical innovations. We have a fantastic keynote lined up and another great panel. So I hope to see you all back then. Be well, and see you around. Bye-bye.